controversy surrounding AI slop in gaming has reached a point where nearly every major AAA studio is actively looking for ways to inject generative content into their billion-dollar franchises. Publishers like Ubisoft, Activision, Blizzard, and EA have invested hundreds of millions into generative tools because, apparently, the future of gaming is one where the only human left is the one buying and consuming the slop content they push out. But seriously, modern AAA development has become extraordinarily expensive, with budgets routinely exceeding hundreds of millions of dollars. Franchises like Call of Duty and EA Sports have yearly deadlines to release the next installment, and with bigger and bigger games, this means studios are under immense pressure from shareholders and executives to deliver more content with fewer delays. So a lot of studios are kind of stuck in this loop where they're scrambling to speedrun game development and release new games every year that grow in scale. And today, AI is being pitched as the golden goose to a lot of these studios as a way to fast track those development times. But what many of these foolish companies didn't anticipate was the level of pushback they would receive, not just from players, but from Steam, one of the largest PC gaming platforms in the world. Steam has made it abundantly clear that AI-generated content will not quietly slip onto their storefront. Nope, Steam cracks down on the content and reviews every game they publish to their platform. Games using generative AI must be clearly labeled as such, a policy that has already sparked frustration among executives like Epic Games CEO Tim Sweeney, who question the usefulness of the tag. In reality, that's just corporate shorthand for it hurts sales. But Steam's stance here isn't surprising. The company has a long history of prioritizing transparency for its users. Their mandatory AI disclosure policy, introduced in January 2024, forces developers to openly state whether generative AI was used in the creation of a game. To understand why that label matters and why this fight is happening at all, we need to look at how the broader AI landscape has evolved. Over the past several years, AI has been sold as the next trillion-dollar frontier, a technological leap so profound that investors speak of it in the same breath as the Manhattan Project or the Apollo program. But unlike those government-led endeavors, this boom is entirely market-driven, and the capital flooding into it makes previous tech manias look modest by comparison. The dot-com frenzy of the late 90s and the crypto surge of the 2010s both attracted billions in speculative money, yet neither comes close to the sheer velocity and scale of today's AI spending. And for all the breathless claims that AI will revolutionize every industry, the only companies consistently profiting from this surge are the ones selling the shovels in this digital gold rush. NVIDIA in particular has transformed GPU manufacturing into a money printer, posting unprecedented revenue growth as studios and startups chase computational power. That rush has now bled directly into gaming, where NVIDIA's latest GPU, the 5090, leans heavily on AI-generated frames to simulate better performance at a time when genuine optimization is getting steadily worse. But the real cost of this shift isn't the hardware, it's the people. Across the industry, reliance on AI has quietly accelerated layoffs. Behind nearly every flashy AI announcement is a restructuring memo waiting in the wings. Artists, animators, and voice actors are often the first on the chopping block, not because AI produces higher quality work, but because it produces good enough work cheaply. And gamers feel the consequences. Entire departments once considered essential to building rich, polished worlds are being downsized under the promise that AI will pick up the slack. Even Microsoft, after reporting record profits, laid off a significant portion of its workforce earlier this year. This mindset is spreading into gaming, where studios see generative AI as a shortcut for cosmetics, assets, and promotional material. We've already seen AI-generated items appear in Black Ops 6, and the trend continued into the poorly selling Black Ops 7. A franchise once defined by massive cultural impact is drifting towards annualized shovelware, and to make matters worse, several major publishers are actively pushing for ways to hide their use of AI. This is already coming during a time when player trust in major publishers is already at an all-time low. Broken launches, rushed sequels, aggressive microtransactions, and declining quality have left many gamers skeptical of AAA studios. Adding generative AI into the mix, especially when done secretively, only reinforces the feeling that companies are prioritizing cost-cutting over the experience. The fear isn't just that AI will be used, it's that it will be used to justify even lower effort and higher monetization. Earlier this year, one of the most highly anticipated extraction shooters, Arc Raiders, finally launched, and on the surface, it was a massive success. Critics loved it, over 200,000 players jumped in at launch, and the game moved more than 4 million copies in its first 2 weeks, cementing itself as one of 2025's best-selling titles. For once, an extraction shooter didn't implode a week after its release. It actually thrived. But the game's biggest problem had nothing to do with balance tweaks, the extraction loop, or the usual launch drama. The real issue came from something players weren't meant to notice. Arc Raiders quietly used AI-generated voice lines, a detail that developers never publicly disclosed. The only reason anyone found out was because Steam required an AI disclosure tag. part of a policy introduced in January 2024 after developers kept slipping generative content into games without telling anyone. That tag wasn't just a footnote, it was the only place this information existed. And once players connected the dots, the realization hit. If Steam hadn't forced the disclosure, the studio would have shipped the entire game without saying a word. The backlash from this grew quickly, and shortly thereafter, Nexon CEO Jung-Hung Lee gave an interview to Japanese outlet GameSpot, where he addressed Arc Raiders' development and the role of AI in the company's future. In the middle of the conversation, Lee casually dropped a line that made every gamer's stomach drop. It's important to assume that every game company is now using AI. For many, that confirmed what they feared all along. AI is rapidly becoming normalized behind closed doors, and major publishers would happily avoid telling players exactly how much of their games are machine generated unless someone forces their hand. This is the exact dynamic Steam has been exposing, intentionally or not. Their AI labels have dragged multiple developers into the spotlight for integrating low effort generative assets into their games, and this terrifies publishers because transparency means potentially fewer sales. And Arc Raiders isn't alone. Ubisoft has already rolled out AI tools to generate NPC dialogue. Activision has experimented with AI assisted marketing assets. Blizzard incorporated AI into internal workflows for concept art and shaders. Square Enix publicly announced that AI will play a major role in its future development pipelines. The industry is moving quickly, often quietly, toward generative content wherever it can reduce costs. That's why Epic Games CEO Tim Sweeney has publicly come forward to criticize Steam's AI tag. On X, responding to a discussion about whether the platform should drop the Made with AI label, Sweeney wrote, "Agreed, the AI tag is relevant to art exhibits for authorship disclosure and to digital content licensing marketplaces where buyers need to understand the right situation. It makes no sense for game stores, where AI will be involved in nearly all future production. In other words, if AI is everywhere, consumers shouldn't be told where it's used, especially if that knowledge affects sales." But the entire debate has now sparked a second wave of discussion among Steam users. Many players argue that the current AI disclaimer is too vague. Steam's tag simply says the game uses generative AI but doesn't specify how. With generative AI becoming one of the most controversial tools in modern development, players want more information to make informed decisions. And with good reason. As the largest PC games market in the world, Steam saw massive growth in 2024, nearly 19,000 new games released that year. In 2025, that number has already been surpassed with weeks left still in December. As the total number of releases climbs, so does the number of titles that quietly integrate AI generated art, code, voices, animations, or music. Valve's disclaimer system has been a meaningful first step, but many players believe it needs refinement. On Reddit, proposals for improving the AI disclosure system have gained significant traction. One post by a user named CarX0, which received over 14,000 upvotes, suggested that Steam's AI survey should be more specific. Their mockup included fields for developers to identify precisely which components of a game used AI, whether it's textures, voice acting, UI elements, or music. Under this system, Steam store pages would display a detailed breakdown instead of a generic warning, giving players clarity on what parts of the game were machine generated versus human made. This brings us back to the broader picture. AI assisted and AI generated games aren't going away. In fact, for many AAA studios, they're poised to become a driving force behind future production pipelines. Executives like Tim Sweeney want AI labeling removed because transparency threatens the commercial viability of that shift. But Steam's refusal to back down and the growing presence from the community for even more detailed disclosures shows that players still value clarity over convenience. And as more studios adopt AI behind the scenes, a clear, standardized, and detailed AI disclosure systems becomes essential, not just to call out studios for cutting corners, but to preserve trust in an industry where players are already exhausted by half-finished releases, live service failures, and now the creeping presence of generative content. If AI is going to shape the future of gaming, then consumers deserve transparency. Steam's current system is a start, but it must evolve, with clearer definitions, specific breakdowns, and honest labeling that reflects how deeply AI is integrated into each title. As the number of AI augmented games accelerates, this level of transparency isn't optional anymore. It's necessary to protect the integrity of digital products and preserve the trust between players and developers. Well, that's all I have for today's video. If you did enjoy it, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. I really appreciate you for making it to the end, and as always, have a good one.